Let's start with the prayers, and then we'll do a little bit of meditation on what we've been learning about recently.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When who is supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow, who with pure bodies form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the 4 faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So take a few minutes to settle yourself down in a comfortable position and to settle your mind in the present. So put aside any thoughts of the past or future or other places or other things, so that you can really focus well and make the most out of this time we have together. So let's do a little reflection on the view of the transitory collection, also called the view of a personal self. So the way that it works is that we have a set of aggregates, a body and a mind. And in relation to our body and mind, there's a merely labeled or merely designated I, me, myself. Also called the mere I. So that mere I exists. It's conventionally existing. But the ignorance that's been in our mind from beginningless time sees the mere I in a wrong way. It sees it as inherently or independently existing, not merely designated, but real, solid, as if it existed on its own, completely independent of anything else, able to set itself up. So it's like ignorance projects a false sense of self, I, onto what is there, the mere I. So this particular form of ignorance is called the view of the transitory collection. It's the ignorance we have about our own self, I, and not about anyone else or anything else. It's just our sense of self or I. And this view of the transitory collection or view of a personal self is the root of samsara. If you think about a tree, a big, tall, strong tree, the roots of that tree keep it firmly in the ground so it doesn't get blown away by the wind. And the roots also nourish the tree so that it produces lots of branches and leaves, and maybe fruit and flowers. So in a similar way, this root of samsara, the view of a personal self, keeps us firmly stuck in samsara. And it gives rise to all the afflictions, attachment, aversion, and so on, which disturb our mind and also incite us to create negative karma, which is the cause of all our suffering. And even when we create good karma, virtue, which is the cause of happiness, our mind is still heavily under the influence of this ignorance. So that virtue becomes contaminated or polluted, and it still keeps us stuck in samsara, even if it leads to good experiences like good rebirths and happiness, but we're still stuck in samsara. So this is a tragic situation, but there is a way out. The path taught by the Buddha. And we have the chance to learn about this path and practice it and follow the escape route from samsara. Especially now, as we're learning about emptiness and how to cultivate the wisdom or insight that directly realizes emptiness, because that's like the sword of Manjushri that destroys ignorance, the root of samsara. So let's study this precious teaching, this explanation by Lama Tsongkhapa, with the motivation of wanting to get ourselves out of samsara and to enlightenment, but wanting to do this for all other sentient beings, wanting to become a fully enlightened Buddha, so that we can help all other beings escape from samsara with all its sufferings and help them reach enlightenment as well. So I want to clear up something that came up at the end of the class last week. We were talking about the different kinds of objects of the view of the transitory collection, the view of a personal self. And both Venerable Losang and Venerable Pema asked about the term apprehended object. What is the apprehended object of that mind? And when I replied, I did so according to the way that term is used in the book Mind in Tibetan Buddhism, which I'm most familiar with. And so in that book, apprehended object is used to translate the Tibetan term zungyul, and that's a synonym of appearing object, or nangyul. So I was thinking that's what they were asking about. Then later I realized that you were probably referring to the way that apprehended object is used in volume 2 what's that called? Foundation of Buddhist Thought. So in that book, the word apprehended object is used for Zindangyo, another of the objects, and that's usually translated as object of the mode of apprehension. That's in mind in Tibetan Buddhism. The Zindangyo is translated as, so in volume 2, Zindangyo is translated as apprehended object, and in Mind in Tibetan Buddhism it's translated as object of the mode of apprehension. That's also the translation we used in FPMT materials. So I thought there may have been some confusion about my reply due to the differences in the way that Tibetan terms are translated into English. So I made a chart to try to clarify this. And you can get this later. You can get a copy of this so you don't have to write it all down. So I put this together, and I hope I got it right. Let me know if you see anything wrong. So on the far left are some different different types of minds or experiences that we might have. And then I just put 3 of the objects. There's a lot others, but these are the main ones. So the first one is the observed object. This is also sometimes translated as focal object, mikyo in Tibetan. And the second object is the appearing object. That's what is actually appearing to the mind. Then the third one is apprehended object, as it's translated in volume 2, object of the mode of apprehension, as it's translated in other books. And this is said to be synonymous with engaged object. So that's another term, engaged object, or jukyo. That those two are synonymous, those two are the same. So let's look at some of these minds. The first one is a relatively simple one, an eye consciousness seeing a table. So we all have that right now if we look at our table. So the observed object is the table. And then I put this according to Prasangika. According to the Prasangika, the appearing object is an inherently existing table. So usually when you study Lorik, when you study this topic of mind and awareness, it's explained according to the Sotrantika school, Sutra school. And they don't talk about inherent existence. In fact, they assert inherent existence. They believe things are inherently existing. So for them, that's not a problem. So according to the Sotrantika school, the appearing object would simply be table, real table. But the Prasangikas say that the appearing object is inherently existing table. So even when we have an eye consciousness, right, even our sense consciousnesses, seeing, hearing, smelling, and so forth, see or perceive inherent existence. Objects always appear inherently existing. And if you don't believe me, you can look at volume 9, page 122. It says, according to Prasangika, all phenomena mistakenly appear to be inherently existent to all sense and mental consciousnesses of sentient beings. The only exception to that is when an Arya is in meditative equipoise, directly realizing emptiness. They don't have any sense consciousness anyway at that time, but anyway, the only thing appearing to them at that time is emptiness, and there's no appearance of inherent existence. So every other consciousness of a sentient being, that means any being that's not a Buddha, always sees things as inherently existing. Okay, so inherently existing table appears, but then the last one on the right, the apprehended object, object of the mode of apprehension, engaged object, is table. So even though inherently existing table appears to our eye consciousness, we don't grasp that. Grasping inherent existence only happens with conception. Only conceptual minds actually, I mean, they use the word grasp, but it's also translated as apprehend. So again, if you don't believe me, volume 2, page 42. I just wanted to, make sure I got it right. So volume 2, page 42 says, when a sentient being looks at a table, that table appears to her eye consciousness as inherently existent, even though it isn't. This consciousness is mistaken with respect to the appearance of the table. Still, it is reliable or valid with respect to the main object, the apprehended object that it cognizes, the table. So we still have a valid mind with regard to what we see, like the table, even if it appears inherently existing. Okay, so the second one is our old friend, the seeing the rope as a snake. And so a conceptual consciousness. So this would be a conceptual consciousness. So after seeing the rope and it appears like a snake, then you have the thought, a snake. Okay, so this is a conceptual consciousness. So the observed object is a rope. There is a rope there that's being referred to. And then the appearing object is the mental image of a snake. Because this is a conceptual mind, and for conceptual minds, the appearing object is always a mental image, or what does Venerable call it? Conceptual image, generic image, meaning generality. There's all these different ways that people translate that term. But anyway, it's an image. It's an image that appears to the conceptual mind. So it would be the mental image of a snake. And the apprehended object, what is being apprehended or grasped, is also a snake. Okay, so this is a conceptual mind. So it thinks there's a snake, and it apprehends, grasps at that as a snake, and that's why we get all scared and emotional. So that kind of mind is similar to ignorance, and like, for example, the view of the transitory collection. So number 3 is that the view of the transitory collection, the view of the personal self. And both 2 and 3 are examples of wrong conceptual consciousnesses. These are wrong, really wrong. They really got it wrong. Okay, so for number 3, the view of the transitory collection, the observed object is the merely labeled I, merely imputed I, or mine, I as the owner of things. So that does exist. That's something. That's what that mind refers to. The appearing object is the mental image, conceptual image, of an inherently existing I or mine. So again, the I or mine doesn't exist that way, but because of ignorance kind of projects inherent existence onto the I or mind, coloring it, in a way that it doesn't exist. So there's a mental image of an inherently existing I or mind, and then the apprehended object is also inherently existing I or mind. So the mind apprehends, grasps at that, even though it doesn't exist. Just like the snake, there's really no snake there, but the mind thinks there's a snake, believes in the snake, gets all emotional. So in a similar way, there's no inherently existing I. There's just a merely labeled I there, but there's this superimposition of inherently existing I. The mind perceives that, believes in it, and then gets all emotional about it. You hurt my feelings. Okay, and then the last one, we're getting right now. Number 4. So this is the inferential realization of the emptiness of inherent existence of I or mine. So this is the first realization we have of emptiness with regard to our I or mine, realizing that it doesn't exist inherently. So, as before, the observed object is the merely imputed I, and the appearing object, the mental image of the emptiness of inherent existence of the I. So we do realize emptiness, that merely labeled I is empty of inherent existence. But this is a conceptual mind, so that it's still, seeing a mental image rather than the actual emptiness. It's seeing a mental image of emptiness. And then the apprehended object, what's being apprehended, is the emptiness of inherent existence of the I. So it does apprehend, it does understand, does realize emptiness, even though it's not a direct, non-conceptual perception, but it still does, it is a realization. And this is, the way we have to go. We have to start with this inferential one. So does this make sense, and does this help? Very, very much.
I have 2 questions. One is, for example, number 2, for the appearing object, is there a reason why that's not the mental image of an inherently existing snake?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, if it's an ordinary, it would be a sentient being. But I was just trying to focus on just making an example that can help us understand ignorance, and how. But yes, you're right. It would be the mental image of an inherently existing snake. But then we would have to say that would be a conceptual consciousness apprehending an inherently existing rope as an inherently existing snake. So it gets a little complicated. But they usually don't bring that in when they introduce that example of the rope and the snake. They don't usually, talk about things appearing inherently existing. But you're right, that they do.
My other question is, would there be any difference between a conceptual consciousness apprehending something, some external object, and a conceptual consciousness apprehending only an internal object? Like if I think about a table without actually seeing a table, would anything differ in that chart?
So instead of the I consciousness seeing a table, a conceptual consciousness seeing a table,
Right.
Yeah, there would be a difference. The appearing object would be the mental image of an inherently existing table.
Instead of an inherently existing table. Right.
Yeah, it would be the mental image of that. But the observed object would still be the same. And I think they would say we still do apprehend a table, because I'm trying to remember now. I'll check on this and answer it more fully later. But Lama Tsongkhapa, I think he has that sort of unique view that even though all of our conceptual consciousnesses, for example, thinking about I, even though I always appears inherently existing, but the mind doesn't always grasp at that. You've probably heard that before. Yeah?
Sometimes there was assent to it. Agree.
Assent, or buy into.
Buy into it.
And there's a nice example in in Geshe Jamba Tekchok's book, Insight into Emptiness, he says, let's say, I think he talks about somebody named Joe. Joe's just sitting in a chair reading a book, kind of really relaxed and, peaceful. And at that time, he has a sense of an inherently existing I sitting there, but his mind isn't sort of grasping at it. And then if somebody comes along and says something insulting to him, then the mind grasps at inherent existence of the I and the person and so on and so forth. So it's not that every single one of our minds grasps at inherent existence. I don't know about other schools, masters from other schools, if they would agree with that, but Lama Tsongkhapa says that. So complicated. But I mainly wanted to clear up this confusion about the terms apprehended object. So as Venerable Chudran translates it in the Library of Wisdom and Compassion, apprehended object is what is translated in other books, some other books anyway, as object of the mode of apprehension. There may be even other translations used by other teachers. I'm sure Alex has his own. But at least he usually puts the Tibetan afterwards, so that you can figure out what he's talking about. Any other questions about this?
And just to confirm, then we have number 5 of a direct realization of the emptiness of inherent existence. Then the appearance of the emptiness of the I is what goes in all the other columns, right?
So with a direct
realization,
realization of emptiness. So the observed object would be the same, merely imputed I. The appearing object of that direct perception would be emptiness, the emptiness of the I, emptiness of inherent existence of the I, and the apprehended object would be the same. Yeah.
But the observed object is not the emptiness of the merely imputed I. That's where my mind went, but it's not.
No. The observed
Okay,
object, I think the observed object just is whatever object the mind is focusing on. So just table or eye or flower or eye. And then, how it appears to the mind is the appearing object. And then how the mind understands it, apprehends it, grasps it would be that third one. So this, it's confusing, complicated, but it does help in some ways, like even with number 3, view of the transitory collection, ignorance. It shows that even though the object doesn't exist the way it appears, we're seeing the object in a mistaken way, in a false way, but there's still an object there. There is something existing. Because some other schools apparently don't accept that. Some of the other Tibetan traditions, they say there is no conventionalities. They don't exist at all. And our mind is just like, it sounds like we're just totally hallucinating everything. So Lama Tsongkhapa didn't agree with that. And that's kind of weird as well when it comes to the path. You're throwing out conventionalities. But we need conventionalities. It's part of the path, the method side of the path. There's an I who's practicing giving, and there's a sentient being to whom we give, and we're creating merit, which will bring us to enlightenment. So to completely throw out conventionalities is like, well, how do you explain the method side of the path? We are just doing everything in a dream? I don't know. I haven't studied the other traditions, but Lama Tsongkhapa just found that explanation incorrect, unacceptable. Pema.
So is it correct for me to understand the appearing object as corresponding to cognitive obscurations, and the apprehended object is corresponding to afflictive obscurations.
Of number
Of
three.
a normal sentient beings, all three of them.
All three.
All four of them. Like it's corresponding to the cognitive obscurations for the
So
appearing.
appearance of inherent existence, yeah, that is due to the cognitive obscurations, the imprints left by ignorance in our mind that cause everything to appear inherently existing. Yeah, and then the apprehended object would be related to the afflictive obscurations.
Afflictive
According to
obscuration.
Prasangika, yeah.
And then, so then wouldn't the first two also be inherently existing table that is being apprehended and inherently existing snake that's being
Doesn't seem to be. It doesn't seem to be. My understanding, I read that passage or that sentence from volume 2, and when it says that even like that first one, even though the table appears inherently existing, but that mind is still reliable with respect to the main object, the apprehended object. It cognizes the table. So I think if you said that the apprehended object was an inherently existing table, you couldn't say that's a reliable mind, a valid mind. If it's a non-existent phenomena that's being apprehended, then that would not be number 2 is definitely not a reliable mind, you know. Also, when we see, if we have a visual perception of a rope and it appears like a snake, so that visual perception, that would be not a valid mind. That would be a wrong perception, because we're seeing a snake that doesn't exist. But if we're seeing a table that does exist, there is a table there, relatively, conventionally. We're seeing the table as a table. That's a reliable mind, according to Prasangika. This will probably come up later, I think. Because I think Prasangika, if I remember correctly, they have some different assertions about reliable. Oh, that was in volume 2 as well. Their way of explaining reliable minds, valid minds, is somewhat different than other schools. Yeah, so if you said for number 1, the last box, if that was an inherently existing table, it wouldn't be a reliable mind. And I don't think the mind, as far as I know, sense consciousnesses don't grasp at inherent existence. That's only conceptual mind that does that. So even if the thing appears inherently existing, the sense consciousness doesn't apprehend that. It's only the conceptual mind that apprehends it. I think that's the case. I hope I'm right about that.
Isn't that different from what you read from volume 9, that all minds... Is that different from what you read from volume 9, that all minds are apprehending inherent existence?
No, what I read from volume 9 was all phenomena mistakenly appear to be inherently existent to all sense and mental consciousnesses of sentient beings. So that's with regard to the second of the objects, the appearing object. So we look at a table, anything we look at, everything we look at, everything we perceive, there's always this appearance of inherent existence. But it's only when we think, when we have conceptual minds, thinking minds, that's when there's this sort of grasping. I use the word grasping because that's what a lot of teachers and books use, but apprehension. It's only conceptual minds that actually kind of grasp or apprehend that. I hope I'm correct about that. You've heard that before. Yeah.
There's a pretty clear explanation and insight into emptiness. I'll send to you that you can digest and report to us.
Yeah, which page number?
86, 87.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while since I read that, but his way of explaining is always so clear. 86, page 86, 87 in Insight into Emptiness by Kensar Jambatikchuk. A wonderful book. Clear. And there was another question Venerable Pema asked last week about if acquired wrong views of self can go from life to life. So I didn't find any specific answer to that, but in volume 3, page 124, there's a nice explanation about the two types of afflictions, acquired and innate, the difference between them. And there it says, acquired afflictions are those learned in this lifetime through adopting the flawed reasoning of mistaken philosophies and ideologies. For example, we may study a philosophy that asserts a permanent soul or an inherently existing creator and come to believe the arguments presented for their existence. So acquired self-grasping is learned in this life through reflecting on fallacious reasonings. So that seems to say that acquired wrong views are only related to things we learn in this life. And if you think about it, like a little 3-year-old child, do you think a little child would think, I have a permanent, unitary, independently existing self, without hearing about that, without anyone telling them such a thing? Do you have some one like that?
I wish I had a clear source, but those would leave imprints, right? Mm-hmm. And so they do carry imprints, but they don't carry the manifest forms of those.
Yeah, and I wonder for those imprints to actually ripen into a view, an actual view that you're holding on to, I would think you'd need to have some external, like hearing about or reading about that kind of idea, and then thinking, oh yeah, exactly, that's what I always believed. And people have that with Buddhism often, At some point in time they hear something about, from the Buddhist teachings, and they think, yes, exactly, that's how it is. I always thought that way. So that's, I think, the ripening of an imprint from past life. But, on the other hand, if you hear about a permanent, unitary, and independent soul, and you think, huh? That doesn't sound right. Then, yeah, you probably don't have that imprint, and maybe you have other imprints like from Buddhist views. So yeah, I think that the actual, like you say, the manifest belief in something like a permanent, unitary, independent self, that doesn't go from life to life. But you could have, we probably all have imprints. We learned those things in previous lives. We believed in them. We fought for them. We died for them. So, yeah, we could have those imprints. So, yeah, a lot of it depends on what we encounter, what we learn in this present life.
So could we say, because this has always puzzled me, that when we realize emptiness, it's those acquired afflictions that are the first ones that are eliminated. Mm-hmm. We would be talking about those imprints that you're talking about over lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So the imprints, actual, acquired afflictions plus imprints and seeds. I think so. So they all go at once. Okay, so let's continue. So we are on page 339. So we just finished going through a section on identifying the ignorance that we're trying to eliminate in the process of cultivating special insight. And this next section is showing that this ignorance is the root of all suffering and being in samsara. And so the different tenet systems, Vaibhashika and so on, all those different schools of philosophy, they have different views about what is the root of our existence in samsara. So it's really important that we know what that root is so we can get rid of it. Okay, demonstrating that it is the root of revolving and cyclic existence. So that being so, the ignorance apprehending the two selves. What are the two selves? Okay, right. And self meaning inherent existence. Explained above is not the apprehension of intellectually acquired selves of persons and phenomena that are thoroughly imputed by the unique assertions of non-Buddhist and Buddhist tenet systems, including, so now he's going to mention some examples of acquired afflictions or acquired wrong views that aren't the root of samsara. Okay. So one is a permanent, unitary, and self-powered person. So that's the view of the non-Buddhist. 2, external objects of apprehension, which are either partless particles that lack an eastern side or coarse composites of them. So this is the Vaibhashika school, who I think they're the only ones among the Buddhists who say that there's partless particles, meaning very tiny particles of matter that can't be broken down any further. They're like the basic building blocks of all physical things. And they don't even have parts in terms of directions, like east and west and north and south and up and down and right and left. They don't even assert those kind of parts. So this is a view, Buddhist, among the Buddhists, this is one view, that there is these partless particles that make up larger things like table or our bodies. Number 3, an internal apprehending consciousness that is either moments of awareness without parts, such as earlier and later, or a continuum of awareness joining such partless moments together. So this is again the Vaibhashikas. So they also say that when it comes to mind or consciousness, it can be broken down. Mind is just this stream of individual momentary mental events, rising and passing, like bubbles, and that mind, like experiences that we have can be broken down in terms of time. Yeah, you can break things down into shorter and shorter moments of experience, but you'll eventually come to the shortest, the smallest moment of experience that can't be broken down any further. So this is what they say, but other schools say, no, you can't do that. You can keep breaking things down kind of endlessly. 4th is self-consciousness that is non-dual in that it is empty of such objects and subjects. So I think that's referring to the it's another term, apperception, self-knowers, the Sautrantikas and the Chittamatra believe in that, this type of mind that looks at mind itself. So when we see a table, we have an eye consciousness seeing a table, there's another mind in there that is seeing that eye consciousness. And that's what accounts for memory, being able to remember, I had that perception. So that's one view that the Prasangikas don't agree with. So they disagree with all four of those. And that these are only intellectually acquired. They're not innate. These are not innate wrong views. But they're just intellectually acquired by learning tenets. So none of those is what we're talking about here, is the ignorance that keeps us stuck in samsara. Rather, it is the two innate apprehensions of a self shared by all, whether or not their minds are influenced by tenets. They have operated beginninglessly without depending on the minds being affected by tenets. Here, just that is held to be the root of cyclic existence, because entering the middle way, Chandrakirti says, the apprehension of I is still seen to operate in those who have spent numerous eons as animals and do not conceive of some unborn permanent entity. Okay, so all sentient beings, including animals, hungry ghosts, hell beings, have within their mind this innate apprehension of inherent existence with regard to themselves and everyone and everything else. So it's not at all something that we learn by studying tenets. It's just an inborn, innate aspect of the mind. So then, through this reasoning, it can be understood that what binds all sentient beings in cyclic existence is innate ignorance. And since intellectually acquired ignorance is only present in proponents of tenets, it is illogical for it to be the root of cyclic existence. So he's saying that, when we're talking about the root of cyclic existence, it has to be something innate, inborn in the minds of all sentient beings, and not something that's just intellectually acquired by learning tenets. Because not everybody has those, right? Not everyone has those intellectually acquired wrong views. It is extremely important to gain discriminating certainty about this. If you do not understand that, then, while ascertaining emptiness by means of the view, you will not know how to hold as the main thing the ascertainment of the absence of real or inherent existence as apprehended by innate ignorance, or how to negate the objects of intellectually acquired apprehensions subsidiary to that. I think that when it says or how to negate, I think it's better to say and, because we need to do both. So what he's saying here is, if we don't have a correct understanding of, what kind of ignorance it is we're trying to overcome, what is this wrong view that's the root of cyclic existence, then we won't know that that is the main thing. That's the main thing we're trying to overcome. And then with regard to those other wrong views, like permanent unitary independent self, self-consciousness, those are secondary. Those are not the main ones. We still need to overcome them. We need to overcome wrong views, wrong ways of thinking and seeing things. But those are secondary. Those are the number one priority. So number one priority is getting rid of this wrong view that grasps at things as inherently existing. So we won't be able to recognize what is the most important thing, number one priority, and what are, less important things we need to work on. Yeah. If you negate the two types of self, but do not refute the way they are apprehended by innate ignorance, you will ascertain just the selflessness that negates only imputations by the proponents of tenets mentioned above. Okay, so you might go through some process of negating certain types of self, and you think, oh, I'm, negating self, and I'm realizing selflessness. But if you're not doing it the way that the self is held by this innate ignorance, grasping an inherent existence, then what you're ascertaining is just a sort of coarse level of selflessness that's related to intellectually acquired wrong views, not the deepest one, the innate one. Therefore, since the ascertainment by means of the view is for the purpose of meditation, when you meditate, you will necessarily only meditate on that. So if you just get this idea of selflessness, but it's a very coarse one, related to, thinking of the I as it's believed in by intellectually acquired wrong views, and you're meditating on that, then you're only going to get an experience of that. You're not going to get the deepest experience of the realization of emptiness. And there's a cute little example about that coming up. Therefore, when you meditate on that selflessness, meaning of one of the intellectually acquired ideas of self, and it becomes manifest, so you could actually get like a realization of that. Even if you perfect that cultivation, there will be nothing more to it than just that. Thus, it is quite absurd to assert that the innate mental afflictions are reversed through seeing the non-existence of the two selves merely as imputed by intellectual apprehensions. So, like, the wrong view of a permanent, unitary, independent self, okay? That's just an intellectually acquired idea that non-Buddhists talk about. So you might be meditating on that. Oh, there's no permanent, permanent, unitary, independent self, and you can get some realization of that, and you think, oh, I have realized selflessness. But that's not going to get rid of your afflictions. Your afflictions are not grounded in that kind of view, right? So this is absurd. And then entering the middle way says, you claim that when one realizes selflessness, one abandons the eternal self, meaning permanent self, yet you assert that that self is not the basis of apprehending an I. So I wasn't too happy about that translation. So Jeffrey, according to Jeffrey, I'll read his way of translating that sentence. You claim that when one realizes selflessness, one abandons the eternal self, yet that self is not asserted to be the basis of apprehending an I as inherently existing. So in other words, Chandrakirti is talking to somebody who says, oh, I have realized selflessness, and by doing that, you're only abandoning the permanent self. But that isn't the self, that isn't the kind of self that is the basis of, grasping at an inherently existing I. Yeah, you kind of got the wrong target. If you remember that slide from last week with the different levels of selflessness, the coarsest one is this, belief in a permanent, unitary, independent self. So that's like really coarse. And not everybody even has it, only those who've studied tennis. So Chandrakirti is saying, so, you think that by realizing that, you are getting rid of the self, the view of self. But that kind of self isn't the basis of the self-grasping that we're trying to get rid of. Hence, it is odd to claim that knowing such selflessness casts out the self-view. And the auto commentary also says, for clarification, this point, the absence of a mutual relation between seeing the absence of a permanent self and eliminating beginningless grasping at a self, is explained by way of analogy. Say you see a snake in a hole in the wall of your house. The idea that you could eliminate your fear of the snake by saying, there is no elephant here, to clear up doubts would, alas, only be laughable to others. Okay, so let's say you live in this funky old house that's made of stones and has lots of holes in the walls. And one day you notice a snake disappearing into one of those holes or coming out of one of those holes. And maybe it's like a really poisonous snake, like a cobra or something. So you're going to be scared, Like at night when I'm asleep, that snake might come out and bite me and I don't wake up. So you're scared of this snake, and if somebody, like your neighbor comes over and it says, oh, don't worry, there's no elephant in here. So is that going to clear up your fear of the snake? So that's like absurd, ridiculous. So he's saying that's similar to somebody thinking, oh, there's no permanent, unitary, independent self. And is that going to clear up your, this ignorance that is at the root of samsara, that's keeping you in samsara and causing all the sufferings of samsara, right? So it's not. That makes sense. Although this is said with regard to the selflessness of persons, one could say the same with regard to the selflessness of phenomena, like this. So it's the same verse as the one above the first verse on this page, but he's using it with regard to selflessness of phenomena. When one realizes, and I'll read it the way Jeffrey would translate it, when one realizes selflessness, one abandons the acquired self, meaning self of phenomena. When you realize selflessness of phenomena, Jeffrey always puts a lot of words in brackets. When you realize selflessness of phenomena, one abandons the acquired self of phenomena, yet that self, it is not asserted that that self is the basis of ignorance. So I'm rewording it. So that self, if it's an acquired self of phenomena, so it's an intellectually acquired idea about phenomena that's incorrect, but that isn't the basis of ignorance. That's not the kind of self that we need to overcome in order to get out of samsara. Like, for example, thinking there's partless particles or partless moments of mind. Hence, it is odd to claim that knowing such selflessness casts out ignorance. So I think that's the point he's making there is pretty easy to understand, but I guess there were people who needed to hear that. Okay, now we come to I think Venerable Ngawan asked about this last week. What self-grasping of persons, self-grasping of phenomena, which one comes first? So someone might object and say, well, Precious Garland says that the apprehension of a self of phenomena that apprehends the aggregates as truly existent is explained as the root of cyclic existence. it says, verse 135, as long as one apprehends the aggregates, one apprehends an I in them. Meaning, as long as one apprehends the aggregates as inherently existing, then one apprehends an inherently existing I in them. So just when we went through this verse with Geshe Yoshitake, he said, this verse describes the process of engagement in and freedom from samsara. As long as there's grasping the aggregates as truly existent, one will grasp the I as truly existent. And this will lead to karma and rebirth. So that's the meaning. So I'll read it again. As long as one apprehends the aggregates as inherently existing or truly existing, one apprehends an I as inherently existing, truly existing in them. If one apprehends an I, meaning an inherently existing I, there is karma, and from karma there is rebirth. So this objector says, whereas entering the middle way says that the view of the transitory collection is explained as the root of cyclic existence. It says, seeing with his wisdom that all faults and afflictions arise from the view of the transitory collection. These two explanations are contradictory because it is illogical to have two different roots of cyclic existence. So this objector is saying, Nagarjuna says this. He says that the root of cyclic existence is grasping the aggregates as inherently existing. Chandrakirti is saying that the view of the transitory collection, grasping the I as inherently existing, that's the root of cyclic existence. So he's saying there's a contradiction there. So Lama Tsongkhapa answers, we would answer that there is no fault in this. This system, meaning prasangika, distinguishes the two apprehensions of a self by their distinct observed objects. But there's no difference in their mode of apprehension because both apprehend the object as established by way of its intrinsic characteristics. So what he's saying is the two types of selflessness, or two grasping, the two types of grasping at a self, phenomena and persons, the difference between them is just in the observed object, what is being observed. So in the case of, so grasping at persons, it's a person. It's either I or some other person. So there's a person there. And then with this grasping inherent existence of phenomena, it's some other kind of object, something other than a person, like a car or a phone or a table or a pizza or whatever, anything that's not a person. So the only difference between them is the observed object. But the way they grasp, the way they apprehend that object is exactly the same. Apprehending it as inherently existing or intrinsically existing. Okay, so then he says the contradiction of two roots of cyclic existence is understood to arise only when positing two modes of apprehension that do not accord in their way of engaging in their objects as the roots of cyclic existence. So he's saying there would only be a contradiction if you're saying there's two different minds that have different ways of apprehending their objects as both being the root of cyclic existence. That would be contradictory. But here there's no contradiction. Therefore, when the apprehension of a self of phenomena is taught as the cause of the view of the transitory collection, that's like what Nagarjuna is saying. It's, grasping the self of phenomena is the cause of the view of the transitory collection. You first apprehend the aggregates as being inherently existing, and then on the basis of that, you grasp the I, the person who's imputed on those aggregates as inherently existing. So there's like a cause and effect relationship. Yeah? So that's, yeah. So he's saying the two subdivisions of ignorance are being described as cause and effect. Now it's really strange. This footnote, number 150, page 438, yeah, there's a footnote to this sentence, and the footnote says, this means that the apprehension of a self of persons is the cause, and the apprehension of a self of phenomena is its effect. Does that sound right? Footnote 150 says, this means that the apprehension of a self of persons is the cause, and the apprehension of a self of phenomena is its effect. There's a boo-boo there. I send it to wisdom. I mean, these things happen, right? Also in the volumes, Venerable Children is, it's just like, it's so hard to get rid of all the errors. You write, and then it's edited, and then it's proofread, and then again it's proofread, and then again it's proofread, and then even with all of that, you still boo-boos that slip under the radar. Anyway, so I'm pretty sure that's a mistake, because it says right here it says, apprehension of a self of phenomena is the cause, and the view of the transitory collection, is the cause of the view of the transitory collection. So anyway, they have a cause and effect relationship. So that means grasping at a self of phenomena, and specifically the aggregates, that comes first. Based on that, then the view of the transitory collection comes. Then he says, when the two are taught as the root of the mental afflictions, they are described as the root of all the mental afflictions with other modes of apprehension. So I think what that means is, both of those kinds of ignorance are the root of mental afflictions, and they are the root of all the mental afflictions that have other modes of apprehension, which that means the afflictions like anger, attachment, and so on, they have different modes of apprehension than this kind of ignorance. We're going to get into that more. It's going to explain more about that. Since this is the same for both of them, there's no contradiction in saying that both are the root of cyclic existence, just as there is no contradiction in saying that both earlier and later moments of the same kind of ignorance are roots of cyclic existence, right? That makes sense. So one moment and the next moment of the same kind of ignorance are both roots of cyclic existence. So it's similar with self-grasping, grasping a self of phenomena with regard to the aggregates arising first, and then on top of that or following after that, grasping the self. So no contradiction saying both are the root of cyclic existence. Although the Venerable Chandrakirti does not appear to clearly explain the view of the transitory collection specifically as ignorance, he generally says that the apprehension of things as truly existent is afflicted ignorance, without differentiating between persons and phenomena. So I guess, if you look at Chandrakirti's writings, you don't find anything where he says clearly that the view of the transitory collection is ignorance, but he does say in general that, anytime we grasp at things as inherently existing or truly existing, that is afflicted ignorance. And that's certainly the case with the view of the transitory collection. So it must be ignorance. He also asserts that the apprehension of a self of persons is the apprehension of persons as established by way of their intrinsic characteristics. Moreover, he frequently explains the innate view of the transitory collection as the root of cyclic existence. If he asserted it to be different in meaning from the ignorance that is the apprehension of true existence, he would be positing two roots of cyclic existence with discordant modes of apprehension, which would be contradictory. Therefore, both of them should be understood as ignorance. So he's analyzed what Chandrakirti says in his writings, and finds that he says this and he says this, and he put it all together. So it must be that both of those two are ignorance, view of the transitory collection, and grasping at phenomena. Both can be said to be the root of cyclic existence. So now we get into juicy stuff. All the other innate and intellectually acquired afflictions, as they operate, apprehend features of that very object that have been superimposed by the innate ignorance explained above. So I don't agree with this translation because it makes it sound like it says features. I think features are like characteristics of that very object that have been superimposed by the innate ignorance. So it's not the case that ignorance that grasps at inherent existence superimposes other kinds of features like good and bad and wonderful and horrible. Ignorance doesn't do that. That is done by, well, strictly speaking, there's this other mental factor. Sometimes it's called inappropriate attention. What does Venerable call it? Inappropriate attention, okay. Distorted attention. Yeah, there's different translations for it. But it's a mental factor. It's actually the mental factor of attention, which is one of the ever-present mental factors. But it's distorted. It's the one that says, okay, we see a person, just a body, a set of aggregates, and it's kind of a little bit attractive. And then our mind just starts spinning, more attractive, wonderful, fantastic. Oh, I'm in love. Oh, I want to be with that person. All that stuff. That is inappropriate attention. And with someone we don't like, someone we have an instant aversion to, then our mind will spin all kinds of stories about that person, how horrible they are, and so on. So all that mental activity that superimposes, exaggerates, and projects things onto what's actually there. That's inappropriate attention or distorted attention. And then after that, then comes the afflictions. And the afflictions come after that. Attachment, aversion, and so on. So that's the actual process. But it's not So he says, so let's read that again. All the other innate and intellectually acquired afflictions as they operate apprehend features of that very object that, I would say, that was superimposed as inherently existing by the innate ignorance explained above. So what ignorance does, ignorance just superimposes inherent existence. That's all it does. And then other, inappropriate attention, that's the one that, superimposes this other stuff, other qualities. Then on top of that come the afflictions. But you don't have to write this down, and I'll tell you, volume. I was going to read it. Well, maybe I will. It's nice. Well, this is volume 7, Searching for a Self. Page 137. The development of afflictions in daily life. Very practical. Although afflictions often arise quickly in our mind, seeming to come out of nowhere, they develop through a sequential process. To have the notion of I, one or more of our mental or physical aggregates must appear. So there needs to be some kind of appearance of an I, of an aggregates. Based on this appearance, a valid sense of I arises, the mere I. This I exists by being merely designated in dependence on the aggregates. Observing this mere I, ignorance erroneously grasps it to exist inherently. That grasping is the view of a personal identity, grasping I. Okay, so there's the aggregates, there's the mere I, and then ignorance grasps an inherently existing I. Based on that, the view of a personal identity grasping mine arises when we think, this is my body, these are my thoughts. The object of the grasping at mine is the sense of mineness, the I that makes things mine. It is not the body or the thoughts themselves, but just that sense of a owner of the body and the thoughts and so on. Grasping the body or thoughts to be inherently existing is self-grasping of phenomena, not self-grasping of persons. So now I'm going to skip some of it, and then it says, once the I is grasped as inherently existing, attachment, anger, and other destructive emotions quickly follow because we want to give this I pleasure and protect it from pain. These mental factors arise very quickly, one right after the other. If our mindfulness is sharp, we can observe this process and thwart it. Otherwise, these afflictions control us. And then the next section, she talks about inappropriate attention and distorted conceptions. Based on ignorance, distorted conceptions or inappropriate attention superimpose attractiveness or ugliness on objects that we believe to truly exist. So we see the object as truly existing already because of ignorance. Then on top of that, but those aspects of the mind, inappropriate attention, superimpose attractiveness or ugliness. Other types of distorted conceptions project permanence on impermanent things, purity on impure things, and pleasure on things that are unsatisfactory by nature. When we apprehend an object that appears attractive, we become attached to it. When we apprehend an object that appears disagreeable, we generate aversion. And when we apprehend a neutral object, we remain indifferent. These and other disturbing emotions depend on ignorance and do not operate separately from them. So I'm just reading a little bit of it, but if you want to know more, that's Volume 7, starting on page 137. But yeah, so there's a lot of things operating in the mind, and it can happen really fast. Like within a couple of seconds, like, what's that expression, love at first sight? It's more like attachment at first sight. But there's actually, steps happening in our mind. The object appears truly existing, inherently existing. We believe in it, we buy into it. And then this, inappropriate attention starts weaving, projecting, superimposing more and more and more, and within a couple of seconds, I have to have that. I have to be with that person. So that's the actual process of how afflictions arise based on ignorance. So I'll just read a little bit. Okay, then. Therefore, this is the middle of that paragraph. Therefore, just as the other four sense powers of eyes and so forth abide in reliance upon the body sense power, rather than abiding independently in a separate place. All the other mental afflictions also operate depending on innate ignorance, which is why ignorance is said to be primary. And that's related to that verse from 400 stanzas, which says, like the body sense, in the body, ignorance pervades them all. Just like our body, the sense power of the body pervades the whole body and all the other sense powers, ignorance pervades all the afflictions. They're all rooted in ignorance. Commentary on 400 stanzas says, attachment and so forth also operate by superimposing features such as attractiveness and repulsiveness on the mere inherent existence of things thoroughly imputed by ignorance. And as such, they operate in a manner that is not different from ignorance and even depend on it, for ignorance is primary. So here he says attachment superimposes features, but Lama Tsongkhapa in his commentary says, that it's actually this mental factor of inappropriate attention that superimposes attractiveness, repulsiveness. A little bit more. After that, once ignorance has apprehended the objects as established by way of their intrinsic characteristics, if an object is agreeable to one's mind, attachment arises when it is observed, and if it appears disagreeable to one's own mind, anger arises toward it. If the object does not appear agreeable or disagreeable to one's mind and remains as an ordinary thing in between, like neutral, we don't really like it or dislike it, we just have neutral feelings about it, neither attachment nor aversion arise when the object is observed, but further ignorance of the same kind does arise. So even when we have neutral feelings, we don't like or dislike the object, there's still ignorance. We still see it in a way other than how it exists. So ignorance gets perpetuated. So I'll stop there. Didn't quite finish that section, but anyway, I can do it next time. Any questions?
I'm curious whether self-grasping ignorance and the view of the transitory collection are the same thing.
No, I mean, they're not exactly the same. Self-grasping ignorance is broad. If you just say self-grasping ignorance or ignorance grasping as self, that could include ignorance grasping a table as inherently existing, or a car as inherently existing, any phenomena, a Buddha as inherently existing. So that's like the big category. And then view of the transitory collection is an instant of that, an example of that. It's only when we grasp our I, our own self, I or mine as inherently existing. So in a sense, they are that is I don't know, what do you call it? An example, a subset? Yeah. So if you imagine self-grasping ignorance is something really, really huge, and within that, then there's the view of the transitory collection.
Okay, so like the view of the transitory collection, all of those times that we're engaged in that, it's all self-grasping ignorance, but not all self-grasping ignorance is this view of the transitory collection.
Right.
Okay.
So how many, what do you call those things? How many possibilities between them? 3? There's one but not the other but not one. How's it? So what are the 3 possibilities? Something that is both would be view of the transitory collection. Something that is view of the transitory collection but not self-grasping ignorance? No. Something that's self-grasping ignorance but not the view of the transitory collection? Yeah, grasping another person, grasping a table, anything that other than oneself. And then something that's neither. A car. The horn of a rabbit, yeah. Well, they actually say you shouldn't use non-existent things. You should use existent things. So like a car or a table or a body would be neither. So 3 possibilities. Sure. Lots of things that are neither of those 2. Any other? Venerable Pema?
I have a question about like how the selflessness of person and phenomena are taught in the different texts, and have you had explanations of why, like in Chandrakirti it's done in one way and in Shantideva it's done in another way, the opposite way?
What do you mean, opposite way?
Like in the Madhyamika Avatara, it's selflessness of person, then he explains selflessness of phenomena. In Shantideva, he does it the opposite way of selflessness of phenomena, then person.
You have a good memory. I don't remember that, but it sounds familiar.
Yeah, like why was there this kind of difference?
The order.
If it's like there's, what was the benefit of doing?
I haven't heard any explanation of that. It could just be each teacher, each writer has their own preference, what they find most helpful. I haven't heard why it's done that way. I haven't studied that many texts on emptiness, like Nagarjuna's texts. How is it done in Precious Garland? Does he teach selflessness of persons first or selflessness of phenomena first? Persons? I don't remember.
Earth, water, fire, wind. Then he does the aggregates after that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's not something I really noticed or heard explanation of why it's done that way. Nope. Okay, so we'll stop there and dedicate.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Buddha, and that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase